This is what 3D printing looks like from underneath. You're watching the first layer of a simple X shape being printed onto a piece of clear acrylic being filmed from below. This is just normal G-code from the Creality slicer, and just tricked my printer into printing on the acrylic here so that I could film from underneath and see what it looked like. The waves being printed here aren't from a slicer. I wrote some really basic G-code generating code to make these sort of simple geometric shapes. I guess you could use any kind of 2D engraving software to generate these paths, but you'd have to tweak it somehow to get the extruder to work at the same time. Looks like these are probably a bit over extruded because you can see the blobs at the corners. I just hard coded my G-code to extrude 0.05 millimeters of filament for every millimeter of head travel, which produces these fairly nice consistent lines, but maybe some slightly different settings would get rid of those blobs, I don't know. But it seems to work okay. So I made this setup starting by making this a simple column in Onshape to print out. It's about 100 millimeters tall, about 12 millimeters in diameter, just a hollow cylinder to minimize the amount of filament needed. It's got a little cutout there to support the corners of the acrylic, as you can see here. And then the CDs there are just to hold my phone at the right level so that the camera focuses at the right point when it's in macro mode. You just have to let the auto home process let the Z-axis home down onto the acrylic. The probe touches the acrylic, and that's enough to trick the printer into thinking that that raised platform is actually the print bed, and it just prints quite happily. It did mean that the nozzle clearing path at the side of the bed hit those columns and ended up with this enormous bridging line going right from one column to the other, which is just about 14 centimeters long. So I'm not sure what the record is for the longest bridge on a print, but it looks like you could get away with something that long if you really needed to. This shows the red X from the top after it had stopped printing, just after the second layer had started, as you can see there. So looks pretty cool from the top. You can see the light shining through, but when I peeled it off the acrylic, it had this really nice kind of glossy finish on the back from the very smooth acrylic instead of the textured print bed. You can see the filament there very nicely. This is the second attempt at making the red X, or my first attempt I should say, and you can see the starts off okay, but then the acrylic platform has moved relative to the machine, and all these second and third runs around the outline are a bit offset, and it's not quite printing in the right place. Maybe not even at the right heights, but it's quite cool to see it doing something nearly right, and just how tiny changes in the adjustments make quite a big difference to how the print comes out. You can see a lot of these filaments aren't even, they're just kind of hanging in free air, but looks quite cool in that kind of three-dimensional look where all the random bits of filament have just crisscrossed and piled up on each other. So here are some more nice simple shapes. First a couple of spirals. This continuous circular one works really nicely with a nice consistent filament width, but the square one coming next doesn't quite look as neat. Get the blobs on the corners again, which I think is partly due to the filament oozing while the head stops temporarily, but Maybe it's just due to the way the two straight line sections overlap at the corner, because they're not, although they're modelled in the software as lines, they're not actually one-dimensional lines, they're two-dimensional. I thought this was a mistake in my G-code, but the red X's have the same kind of blobs, so it's just something that happens, I guess. And it's interesting to see how the filaments cross in the middle of these houses as well, and I thought that might cause a problem, but it seems to work fine. The head just crosses over the previous filament without sort of crashing into it, and you get the nice neat cross in the middle there. Well, that's all for this video, just a quick one. I hope you found that as interesting to watch as I found it to make. It's quite fun to figure out how to get this to work. It wasn't that difficult in the end. It's always cool to see something from a different perspective like this. If you've got any ideas for anything else to print on this setup that you think might look cool from underneath like this, just let me know in the comments, and I can have a go at the best ones for a future follow-up video. But until then, many thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.